Good day everyone, so for today's video I'm going to discuss to you the summary of El Filibusterismo guided by the following themes that we had conceptualized as we read the novel. El Filibusterismo's themes seems to focus on how to reach a social reform and revolution. A number of chapters have long dialogues of text that seem to resemble debates. An example is chapter 7, which entitled Simon, in which Simon tries to convince Basilio to join the bloody revolution, almost like Darth Vader trying to convince Luke to join the dark side. So this represents Rizal's fading hopes for reform against his long-held abhorrence and aversion to revolution. The book focuses on inevitable revolution and whether or not the Philippines should rebel peacefully and diplomatically or violently. So here are the themes in El Filibusterismo, or the Reign of Greed. So the objective of the lesson is, after the discussion, the student should be able to examine the different themes in every chapter of the novel El Filibusterismo. Second is, describe the difference between Filipino before and nowadays. Third is, classify the following themes in the novel based on how you read it. And we have here the 8 themes in El Filibusterismo. First is freedom. What kind of freedom present in the novel El Filibusterismo? Second is government. How the government was run in the novel. Third is education. What kind of education they have in the novel. Fourth is vengeance. Who were responsible to the revenge in El Filibusterismo? Fifth is patriotism. What was the real definition of patriotism in the novel? Sixth is love. How precious love being described in the novel. Seventh is cruelty. How cruelty affects the life of Filipino in the novel. And lastly, we have heartbreaks. What happened to Simon and Maria Clara. First is freedom. Fighting for freedom. So the interpretation based from El Filibusterismo. El Filibusterismo inspired the Filipino people to fight for their freedom against the oppressive and abusive Spaniards. It can be seen in chapter 26, Pasquinids, chapter 27, entitled The Friar and the Filipino. So in the novel El Filibusterismo, Crisostomo Ibarra back to the Philippines as Simon, a rich jeweler and a confidant of the Captain General after 13 years ago for vengeance against Spaniards. And one of his reasons ay ang maghimagsik laban sa pamahalaang Kastila nang sa gayon ay may isagawang revolusyonaryo at makamit ang kalayaan na matagal nang inaasam ng maraming Pilipino. So Simon insinuates himself into Manila high society and influences every decision of the Captain General mismanage the country's affairs so that the revolution will break out. Simon encouraged the upper classes to commit abuses against the masses, to revolt against the oppressed Spanish colonial regime. This time, he does not attempt to fight the authorities through legal means but through violent revolution using the masses. So through Simon's actions, he inspires and convinces his countrymen to fight for the freedom they deserve. So from the novel, Filipino women have no freedom to study at universities. They are also not allowed to engage in professional work and work freely with men. True, they are permitted to run their business, and it can be seen in chapter 28 entitled Tatakot and chapter 29 entitled Exit Capitan Tiago. So, equality in the society as a result of freedom. So, through the novel of Jose Rizal, it became a way for the Filipino to become or to have an equal society for the Filipino people and for the Filipino citizen. Next is, the government was ruled by the Spanish. So from the beginning of the novel, in Nolimitang Here and El Filibusterismo, the main reason of Rizal in writing this novel was to address the manipulation of the Spanish during the colonization in the Philippines. So, Spanish friars and officials abuses their power and authority to manipulate Philippine people and abuse their rights as an individual. Every inhuman doings of Spaniards was all experienced by the Filipino in their own place and origin. So, Filipinos suffered from unequal rights, unfair tax payment, inequality in education, human rights violation, and cruelty in the hands of Spanish. So that was all happened during the governance of the Spanish regime or Spanish colonization. So one of the observation into this generation is because of the novel No Limitang Hero and El Filibusterismo, Filipino nowadays or in today's generation will learn from the history and they take an action now to avoid mistakes from the past. So because of Rizal, Philippines got free to the colonization of the Spanish and the present, we could now benefited by our rights through the existing laws in the state. Now, Filipino can freely move and do what they want without any hindrance from fear. So another theme that we gathered or we conceptualized as we read the novel is their government. So interpretation based from El Filibusterismo. Rizal's novel accurately depicted the self-serving government officials in form of friars. In the novel, we could see how those power abused their position to get favors and to satisfy their lusts. And that can be seen in chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 19. So in terms of government in El Fili, friars and foreign authorities are the one who have the power to obey the laws even it was not in the right way. So in chapter 4, entitled Cabezang Talas, we can see how government govern and act in the Filipino people in a certain situation. So si Telapastforo or mas kilala sa tawag na Tales ay anak ni Tandang Selo. So inaalagaan niya ang isang bahagi ng kagubatan dahil sa palagay niya ay walang nagmamay-ari nito. So kasama niya roon ang kanyang ama, asawa at mga anak. So pinamuhunan niya ito kahit walang kasiguraduhan ng pag-unlad niya dito. Subalit, malapit na sana nilang anihin ang mga unang tanin ng biglang inangkin ito ng korporasyon ng mga pari or friars. So, hiningian ng sabing korporasyon si Tales ng 20 or 3 piso kada taon. So, tinanggap ni Tales ang utos na ito dala na rin ng kanyang kagipitan at kanyang kabaitan. Habang lumalaki ang kanyang ani ay lumalaki din ang hinihinging buwis ng korporasyon. So, plano sana niyang pag-aralin ang kanyang dalagang anak sa Manila, ngunit ito ay di nangyari dahil sa taas ng buwis. So, nang umabot sa 200 piso ang buwis na hiningi ng mga korporasyon is napilitan itong tumutol. So, ngunit tinakot siya ng nangangasiwa na kung hindi ito makakapagbayad ng buwis ay sa iba na lamang ipapatanim ang lupa or ipapatanman ang lupa. So, naubos ang kanyang salapi sa pakikipaglaban sa hukuman, subalit nanatili pa rin itong bigo. Madalas siyang may daladalang baril sa tuwing pag-uwi papunta sa bukid upang ipagtanggol ang kanyang sarili kung sakali mang may tulisan. From this situation, we can see how impactful the governance of Spanish friars and Spanish officials during in El Filibusterismo. So pagkara ay ipinagbawal din ang baril, gaya ng gulok naman ang dinala nito. So sinamsam ang dala nitong gulok, kaya palakon naman ang sunod na dinala niya. So nabihag si Tales ng mga tulisan at ipinapatubos ito sa mga halagang 500 piso. So napilitang ipagbenta ni Julie or Huli ang lahat ng kanyang alahas maliban sa agnos na binigay ni Basilio. Subalit, hindi pa rin ito sapat upang matubos si Tales, kaya namasukan ito bilang utusan. At hindi ito nagustuhan ni Tales, kaya nalungkot siya sa pangyayaring iyon. Another interpretation based from the novel is the system of government through corrupt officials dominated by the friars can lead to the downfall of Spain. So, dahil sa kagagawan at sariling aksyon ng mga pari at saka Spain officials, nagkaroon ng pamumuong galit sa mga puso ng mga Pilipino at ito ay re-resulta ng isang revolusyonaryo. So the course of action that the Filipinos will take if the Spaniards did not listen to the warning revolution. So as an observation in today's situation, we observe that through the government before, it caused a greed of money, desires, and power, caused a severe corruption in the government. Democratic government serve as bridge of the Filipino to voice out their necessary needs as its citizen and the citizens should be the leaders of its governing body and not other way around. So we are now very thankful. So next is the education. What is the importance of education in El Filibusterismo? So, as an interpretation based from the novel, El Filibusterismo officials tried to preserve a monopoly for education. This meant that not everybody has an equal opportunity to better themselves through knowledge. Results show that those in power would rather rule over the uneducated. So, according to Izagani, the friars are intentionally delivering antiquated education to keep the Filipinos from aspiring freedom and civil liberties. And we can see that in chapter 11, chapter 8, chapter 27. So, as we can see in chapter 11, and chapter 27, the friar and the Filipino, kinausap ni Isagani ang isa sa kanyang guro about the pagsasama ng wikang Espanyol sa akademiko ng mga kabataan or estudyante. So, sa Las Bañas, naglaro sina Kapitan General kasama sina Padre Erin, Padre Sibayla, at Padre Camora ng Trestillo. So, sinadya magpatalo ng dalawang pari upang mabigyang kasiyahan ang general. Habang galit naman si Padre Camora. So, hindi lingid sa kaalaman ni Padre Camora ang sadyang pagpapatalo ng dalawa ay para sa Akademya ng Wikang Kastila na nais ipatayo ng mga mag-aaral. So, nagkaroon ng talakayan at pagtatalo tungkol dito ang mga Fraile at si Simon. So, maraming tumutol, marami rin ang umayaw sa pagsasama ng wikang Espanyol sa akademiko ng mga mag-aaral. Subalit, sang-ayon naman kay Simon is ito lamang ay magiging sagabal sa mga Pilipino para maging malito ang mga Pilipino dahil sa ginagamit itong mga wika. So, as we observe in today's situation, equality in education system become dominant in the society. Education is accessible to all Filipinos regardless of their status in life and in the living society. So, kung dati is limited lamang yung education na nabibigay sa mga mag-aaral sa bawat Pilipino, ngayon is we have now an equal rights to study and to educate ourselves in formal school. So, meron din tayong free school or free education came from our government, which is democratic government. And lastly, we have the vengeance. So in the novel El Filibusterismo, the main focus of writing Jose Rizal, or the main reason of why Jose Rizal wrote this novel is to revenge from the Spanish colonization. So, vengeance is defined as the act of committing harmful actions a person or group in response to the grievances. So, the novel is a dark, brooding, and time-satirical novel of revenge, unfulfilled love, and tragedy. Likewise, the novel shows full of bitterness, sorrow, pain, violence, and vengeance to awaken the Filipino people against the abusive masters. So, kagaya na sinabi ko kanina, the main reason of Jose Rizal, of why he wrote this novel, is all about the vengeance for Crisostomo Ibarra, who came back in the Philippines as Simon. It bore an irritable urge to revolution among the Filipinos to go against the government and the practices of the church, which appeared realistic. So, as an observation into the situation, it caused an occurrence of activists, journalists, and terrorists. So, dahil sa mistakes and revolution na nangyari noon, so natutunan tayo mga Pilipino na lumaban, magsalita, and mag-voice out about about our necessary needs and rights in life. So, nagkaroon tayo ng mga activists, came from different aspects in the society. We also have journalists, and as a negative impact of it is the terrorist. So, nagkaroon tayo ng terrorist because of the governance of the government in the politics. So, from the novel, Simon's main reason of came back to the Philippines is para maghiganti kay Maria Clara, para maghiganti sa kung anong nangyari sa kanila ni Maria Clara, at second reason is, and one of its main reason is to enlighten the Filipino people about the wrongdoings of the Spanish colonization in our country, which is the Philippines. At ginamit ni Simon ang kanyang kaalaman, skills, and talents para magsimulang maghigante at humikayat ng maraming Pilipino sa paglaban sa pamumuksa ng masamang gawain or wrong governance of the Spanish in our country.